Today I wanted to go over factoring with an A term using the slip and slide method. So this is what I would say one of the more complex methods. I really prefer the other methods in my previous videos. So if you would prefer an easier method, feel free to check out the factoring part 1 and part 2 videos on my channel. Otherwise, if you are being asked to use slip and slide method by your teacher and they would really prefer you to use that method, here is a quick explanation. So we have talked before about how the standard form of a quadratic includes ax squared plus bx plus c. So only when we have an A term, meaning like for this example, 4x squared minus 8x plus 3. This would be if we had an A term. Usually if it's just x squared, something plus 2x plus 3, that would be an A term of 1. And so we wouldn't necessarily need the slip and slide method for this particular case. So slip and slide, that would mean, and similar to the other methods, T-chart and big X method, is we're going to take the A term and multiply it by the C term. Slip and slide is a little bit different because I'm literally going to rewrite this equation. So I'm going to slip my 4 down to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and write the rest of it the exact same, just now my 4 I multiply by the 3. So we're going to call this x squared minus 8x plus 12. I have slipped the 4 down to the end. Now I'm just going to use any of the other methods or just factor in whichever way I can here. I need 2 factors that multiply to get 12 and add up to 8. So again, I would still use the T-chart method if I wasn't sure, or just trial and error. You can watch those other videos if you need some help on those methods. So for here, trial and error, I know 2 x's get me x squared. For 12, I could think about 6 and 2, 4 and 3, 12 and 1, and 6 and 2 I know are going to get me to 8. So 6 and 2, and then I need them both to be negative for my last term to be a positive 12. So we can see here, if I FOIL to check, I always suggest FOIL to check. If I were to FOIL this, my first term does not get me back up to my original 4x squared. So immediately I know I've got to do some work. And the slide is what is coming next. So here is where I'm going to now slide the 4 back out. So this would be the slide step. So the only problem here is I've got some kind of weird fractions that start to look gross. So if I can reduce these, then this is where I would go ahead and reduce. I know 2/4, that would become 1/2. So here, I'm going to move over to this column now. If I reduce both of these fractions, 6/4, I know I can reduce both by 2. That would be 3/2. And 2/4, we said, can be reduced to 1/2. If I reduce the fraction and it's still a fraction, I'm going to move the denominator to the front. So both of these would become 2x minus 3, and this would be 2x minus 1. And now, if we FOIL to check, these should be our factors. My first term is 4x squared, which is what I needed. My outer is minus 2x. My inner is minus 6x. Both of those add up to minus 8x. My last term is positive 3. So these would be my 2 factors. This would be my answer here. So it's a little strange. We slip the 4 down to the end. Then we have to slide it back out, and if we still are stuck with a fraction, we move it back to the front. So we slide it back to the front. Slip and slide. So let's do another example of that. One thing I wanted to mention is if you are given a problem that does have an A term up here in the front, I would always suggest trying to take it out. Because if you start to notice, it's much easier to deal with a quadratic when it doesn't have an a term. So if we needed to factor something, if I can get rid of that a term, that makes my life a lot easier. So if it's something I could divide out or factor out of all of these terms, that would really be a lot easier. So in this case, I'm going to take out the 2 out of everybody first. That would be my very first step, is try to reduce everybody and get rid of that a term if I can. So in this case, I can take a 2 out of everything, and what would be left would be x squared minus x minus 12. I can double check by redistributing, right? Kind of like FOIL to check. I redistribute to check, and that gets me 2x squared minus 2x minus 24. So that works out. Now, when we are solving quadratics and setting them equal to 0, essentially what I've done is I can divide both sides by 2, and 0 divided by 2 is still just 0. So essentially the 2 goes away. If I'm just factoring, I would want to keep that 2 there to show that it's still a part of the factor. I factored it out. So depending what the end result is, you would keep the 2 there or not. But inside the parentheses, this is a lot easier to factor without that a term. So in this case, I can do any of my methods. I could do trial and error or t-chart. T-chart would just be negative 12 here and negative 1. Trial and error, I'm just thinking of 2 things that multiply to get negative 12 and add up to negative 1. Immediately, I know 4 and 3 have a difference of 1. And if I think about my signs, the negative 4 has to be bigger. T-chart, same thing. I would just have 4 and 3. And then b, this is the b term, has to be my bigger number. So in this case, this would be the fully factored out version. If I'm setting that equal to 0, I would divide both sides by 2. The 2 goes away. I would have 2 options of x equals 4 and x equals negative 3. So those would be the final answers there. So that would be the reducing before I needed to do the slip and slide or any of the other options. Always trying to get rid of that a term if I can. So let's just do one final example for the slip and slide. If I have 3x squared plus x minus 4, I'm going to slip my 3 down to the end. So that would be x squared plus x minus 12. Then if I factor this, I can do trial and error again, back to the 4 and 3. This time my 4 has to be bigger, and that would get me a negative 12. Now, I know if I FOIL to check x squared, my first term is not 3x squared. So I need to slide my 3 back through. And this is where this would reduce to 1. That just becomes x minus 1. This, I can't reduce 4/3 anymore, so he would slide back to the front. So this would be 3x plus 4. So in that case, I can FOIL to check my first term, 3x squared, outer minus 3x, inner plus 4x. That gets me positive 1x. And my last term is negative 4. So again, if we take it a step further, our final answers are x equals 1 and x equals negative 4/3. But if we just needed to factor, that would be our final answer there. So that is slip and slide method. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and tell me your favorite factoring method.